Carlisle House. This home was originally built in 1896, making it more than 100 years old. It was purchased by Charles Carlisle and his wife, Clara Belle Carlisle, in 1902. He came from the Midwest to take the job as the ticket agent for the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. He and Clara Belle were married in a newly built Presbyterian Church on September 5, 1897. They raised 2 children in this house. The railroad was very important to the early Novato, and you will find many connections to it in Novato. Later, Carlisle opened a Wells Fargo Express office by the railroad depot and started a local hardware store. Mr. Yel Morini, originally from Switzerland, worked on a dairy. After coming to Novato, he saved his money and eventually bought his own dairy. He sold that in the early 1900s and moved into town and built his saloon, facing right towards the depot. Also, strange black doors are beneath the street level. No one knows whether the street used to be lower, graveled over with mud, yearly building up the road, perhaps, but they sandbag it every time it rains. Flat Iron Building. This was originally built in 1908 by Abraham Yel Morini. Mr. Yel Morini wanted to compete with the other saloons in town, so he built it on the corner of Scott and Grant Avenue, aka Marine Street. So passengers getting off the train wouldn't see any other saloons but his. Later, Charles Carlisle opened the Wells Fargo Express office here. Novato Railroad Depot circa 1879. This building served as Novato's first railroad depot when Northern Western Pacific Railroad was constructed. It was later moved here to make room for a new depot building by the railroad tracks in 1903. Built of redwood, you can see it's a very simple build, almost like a barn. The earliest buildings in Novato's were very simple, especially if they were meant for a very practical use. This building was used for passengers waiting or produce and freight waiting. There are hundreds of gallons of milk were shipped to San Francisco morning and evening from Novato. 3 passenger trains and several freight trains daily passed through, carrying tons of fruit, dairy products, and mail, even cows. Cost to ride Novato to San Rafael dropped from 55 to 35 cents in 1889. After the building was moved, it was used as a stable for horses. Second Novato Train Depot. The first Novato depot was moved behind Louisiana Hall, and the second depot was built about 1903. The second depot had 2 waiting rooms, one for men and one for women. Many male passengers smoked or chewed tobacco and used rough language. Women in those times did not smoke or appreciate swear words. Novato Railroad Depot, the original site of all 3 railroads, was constructed in 1917. There was no high school in Novato until 1955, so young people had to take the train to San Rafael to go to high school. And there was no bus to bring them to the train, so they mostly had to walk from anywhere in the valley. Trains stopped running on a regular basis through Novato in 1955, trucks carrying goods over highways, and the train station burned down. Novato House Hotel, circa 1889. In the early days, trains were very simple, no food, drink, or restrooms. Not built until 10 years after the train's arrival. The Novato House offered rooms, food, drink, and in back a livery stable for people getting off the train to have transportation through town. About 10 years later, Captain Leon Hirabaran moved over from the settlement at Novato Creek, where he took over the Novato House Hotel. But before that, he used to pilot a barrage called California and sail all the way up to Novato Creek, to where the post office is now, to pick up fruit from Rancho Novato and other fruit ranches, and then deliver the goods to ranches. He quit this job because railroads replaced water transportation on Novato Creek. And Mrs. Hirabaran cooked at the hotel. A meal with a bottle of wine cost 50 cents. The fashion shop. This building was built by a blacksmith named Stephen Orsaya in 1893, which makes it about 110 years old. This type of building has a false front. In old Western movies, the false front had a formal business-like front, but behind it was really just a shed or a barn. If you had a false front close together, people couldn't see the little sheds behind. It was a cheap and early way to construct commercial buildings in California. It also provided a larger space for advertising your business than a peaked roof front. Louisianow Hall and Hotel. John Louisianow and his wife decided to open a hotel, restaurant, and saloon of their own to compete with the old Novato House Hotel in about 1899. He called his place the Club and advertised that he now had the largest recreation room in the county, used for dances, meetings, plays, fancy balls, and even silent movies by townfolks. It was a center of community activity for many years. After Louisianow died, the Druids bought the building in 1937. It still serves as the Druid Hall. Carlisle's Hardware, 1910. He started out as a ticket agent for the railroad and then branched out to Wells Fargo agent before trying hardware. The reason he opened this was because all the farmers needed equipment, tools, and other supplies. So a hardware store was very profitable. In about 1938, Mr. Carlisle remodeled part of his store to provide an area where Miss Carlisle could sell wedding gifts and other types of items like that, which women would buy. Miss Carlisle still did her work at home, but when she had a customer, Mr. Carlisle would crank up the phone on the wall and call her. She would stop what she's doing and walk down to the store to help the customer, then return home to her work. Novato Bank, built in 1913. Novato was a very small town before 1905. It was made up of mainly few dairy ranches and orchard farms. But by 1910, it was growing steadily because of the big boom in the chicken ranch industry. New chicken ranches were sprouting up all around, and most were very profitable. By 1913, there was enough money and people to need a bank in the town. Before 1913, people had their banking in Petaluma or San Rafael. Unlike all the other buildings today, this bank was built and constructed with brick. Brick or stone was symbolized as permanence and stability. In this case, brick was also fireproof for the storage of the money. It was built by Frank Silva, James Black Brudell, and George Morrison. Brudell was the first president of the bank, and Morrison was the first cashier of the bank. Scott's Store. This general store was built in 1889 by A.D. Scott. He moved from the old town, which had been built at Novato Creek, where barges used to come up the creek. Mr. Scott moved here to be near the railroad. If we were standing here 100 years ago, we would see more hotels, saloons, and general or grocery stores on East Grant Avenue. Now there are lots of gift shops and coffee houses. The Presbyterian Church. The Presbyterian Church was built in 1896. The bell could be heard all over town, so the people knew it was time to go to church Sunday morning. Also known as the community church because it was the only Protestant church in Newtown, Nevada. So not just Presbyterians attended here. This church was where Mr. and Mrs. Carlisle were married in 1897.